Today, Inori will face fate in a battle of wits and strength, and as night falls, he will stumble upon a sacred place hidden by illusion, home to a beast of legend, but in this forgotten land, one wrong step could cost him everything. The second princess, with her regal grace, lifted a hand and began the lesson. But just as she was about to speak, Inori, still curious and uncertain about this royal world, hesitantly raised his hand. He asked whether being the second princess meant she was the younger sister of the first. The second princess smiled softly and explained that despite her title, she was actually the elder sister, but due to certain circumstances in the royal household, the throne had been passed to her younger sister instead. The matter, as she hinted, was too complex to explain in full. Inori took in this revelation quietly, his mind processing the complicated dynamics of the royal family. The second princess resumed the lesson, and Inori listened attentively as she began explaining the kingdom's historical origins. According to her, the Rising Sun Kingdom had been established long ago by one of the legendary heroes who helped defeat the previous Demon King. What set this hero apart was that she wasn't a sword-wielding knight or a regal monarch. She was a woman, a magician, a witch. This foundation had profoundly shaped the kingdom's culture and societal structure, where witch worship and respect for magical women were deeply embedded in tradition. As a result, women held central roles in the government, military, and magical education. Unlike most kingdoms, where power passed from father to son, the throne in this kingdom was inherited by women of the royal family. The king, rather than inheriting power, would marry into the royal family and serve as a regent, managing the kingdom's affairs without absolute control. The queen, however, held ultimate authority and could even strip the king of his power, through divorce if necessary. This matriarchal system was unlike anything Inori had ever encountered before. From the second princess, Inori gained insight into the nation's rich and unique history, as well as the foundational principles of its magical practices, which were intricately woven into the fabric of culture and power. But as the lesson continued, fatigue set in. Despite his best efforts to stay alert, Inori found himself drifting off to sleep, the world around him fading until he succumbed to an unplanned nap. Later that night, under the soft glow of his room's lantern, Inori sat upright in bed, reflecting on the day's lessons and mentally preparing for what lay ahead. Tomorrow's topic would cover magical ideologies, followed by practical magic training. He felt a bit guilty for falling asleep during the second princess's lesson, especially since she had shown no irritation. Instead, she had smiled at him, her expression serene and unbothered. It was time to conduct an experiment, one he had delayed the previous day. Activating his true mystic eye, Inori focused on its unique ability, the power to store any magic circle he saw and later activate it. However, despite concentrating hard, nothing happened. No magic circle was stored, and no activation occurred. This was just as he feared, a complete failure. But then a thought struck him. He remembered that he possessed another eye from another world, a world where the situation had been perilous. If he were to lose control, the consequences could be disastrous. To prevent this, he decided to hypnotize himself. Recalling a complex hypnotic technique taught by an eccentric doctor from that world, Inori used his mystic eye of poetry's photographic memory to recall every detail. The magic circle for the hypnosis spell had come from the same world as his magical eyes. Drawing the intricate circle carefully, he felt a strange sensation, something shifting within him. Had he succeeded? To confirm, he rang the bell in his room, summoning Nala. When she arrived, Inori, without hesitation, used the hypnotic spell on her, activating it through his eye. He asked her a completely random question: what color underwear she was wearing. That day, without missing a beat, Nala replied, "It was black." Inori confirmed the answer was correct. His eye had shown him the truth, but another realization hit him. Could it be that his true mystic eye could only store magic circles from the world where he had originally obtained it? This discovery only deepened the mystery surrounding his eyes. Thinking deeply, Inori considered whether the only magic he could store was advanced hypnosis. But that didn't feel like the whole answer. Too many strange occurrences, summonings, unexplained phenomena suggested there was more to it. He focused on the memory of his own summoning, the intricate magic circle that had burned itself into his memory. He concentrated hard and stored that summoning magic circle within his eye. With newfound resolve, Inori stepped outside. He recreated the magic circle exactly as he remembered, and a surge of power rushed through him. He had done it. Inori had successfully teleported to the forest near the capital city. This wasn't just ordinary movement. It was a powerful fusion of techniques, the long-distance vision granted by his mystic eye and the perspective-shifting ability of the god's mystic eyes. With this newfound power, he could now travel freely at will, using the cover of darkness. To experiment further, harnessing black magic, Inori discovered he could dominate non-living objects. Once dominated, these objects could be manipulated and even stored in his shadow, disappearing from the physical world. There was a catch. He couldn't use these objects to control other non-dominated ones directly, but by stopping the domination at the right moment, he could influence his surroundings in subtle yet effective ways. This opened up a world of possibilities, but it also complicated things. What surprised him even more was the versatility of his black magic. He could move into hidden spaces, like inside hollow trees or beneath the earth, places others couldn't reach. During the day, Inori focused on honing his combat skills by observing the training sessions of the Knight Commander. He memorized every movement, every stance, and replicated them tirelessly. His body began to respond instinctively, and he felt a sense of progress. Then, a notification appeared in his status window: Swordsmanship Level 1 acquired. Inori paused, a sense of accomplishment settling over him. He now understood how skill acquisition worked, through focus, repetition, and patience. The next goal was clear: unlock the skill that would allow him to level up. Just then, a strange sound echoed through the forest. Intrigued, Inori followed it and encountered a creature unlike anything he'd seen before. It was difficult to identify, neither fully bird nor monster. His system identified it as a bird-type monster with a stat of 765. Inori's eyes widened. This creature was immensely powerful, far more than the average monster. He had heard rumors that the luxurious bed in his room was made from the feathers of such a monster. Could the people of this kingdom really hunt these formidable beasts? Scanning the forest further, Inori discovered that even the weaker monsters had average stats between 500 and 600. It was clear that either the monsters in this forest were unusually powerful, or Inori himself was still far too weak. With this realization, Inori's resolve hardened. He had to grow stronger. Meanwhile, in the royal castle, a quiet moonlit night unfolded. The second princess walked through the vast, silent corridors until she arrived at the training grounds where Knight Iana stood guard. Iana, surprised by the princess's late-night appearance, respectfully bowed. The princess, calm and composed, requested a private conversation. She asked about the three heroes' training and was told that they refrained from using magic tools, focusing instead on mastering physical strength first. Iana emphasized the importance of building a solid foundation and avoiding dependency on external magic. The second princess, after a brief silence, seemed to contemplate the reasoning, but subtly questioned whether introducing magic tools now would have been more efficient. Iana stood firm, believing that strength earned through effort was far more valuable than relying on magic too early. The princess, after a brief pause, lowered her gaze and softly apologized, acknowledging she may have overstepped. Yet, Iana noticed something in her demeanor, a hint of disappointment, something that hadn't been there before. As the conversation continued, Iana probed further, asking what the second princess truly thought of her elder sister, the first princess. The second princess praised her sister as talented, full of ideals and conviction, and someone naturally fit for the throne. But Iana pressed her, asking if those words were sincere or just the response expected of royalty. The second princess's expression hardened, and her tone grew colder as she reminded Iana of the dangers of speaking carelessly within the palace. Speaking poorly of the first princess could be seen as blasphemy, a dangerous offense in the kingdom. Iana, sensing the shift in the princess's demeanor, gave a respectful bow, but a quiet tension lingered in the air. Iana silently wished that the princess would open up more and trust others, but the scene shifted smoothly to Inori. 2 weeks had passed since his arrival in this unfamiliar world, and during that time, his days were consumed by intense martial arts training. His progress was evident. The three heroes were also adapting steadily. Ryudo continued his swordsmanship training, trying to make the blade feel natural in his hands, practicing day and night, slowly grasping the art of close combat. Tamaki, on the other hand, had taken up staff training. Although the staff was typically associated with magic, she wielded it more like a club, relying on brute strength instead of magical finesse. Inori couldn't help but wonder if she was relying on raw muscle rather than strategy. Aoi, the quiet one, had taken up archery, and her skills were rapidly improving. Typically, archers were vulnerable when shooting, needing someone to protect them, but Aoi was different. She used barrier magic to shield herself while firing arrows from a distance, removing the usual weaknesses of a long-range fighter. Inori mentally assessed the party's dynamics. Ryudo, the close-range fighter, Tamaki, versatile in both magic and physical combat, and Aoi, who was swift, defensive, and deadly from afar. Together, they formed a well-balanced team, each complementing the other's strengths. As for Inori, his path was different. 3 days ago, his formal martial arts training had begun in earnest, but instead of swords, his focus was on daggers and throwing techniques. His lessons included stealth, trap detection, and disarming skills, everything a scout would need. It was becoming clear that his role was being defined early, a shadow who operates behind enemy lines. This suited him, and his detection skill, vital for scouting missions, needed fine-tuning. Unlike others, his progress depended more on personal effort, and his unique abilities required careful growth and strategic application. Among these abilities was his power of remote control by domination, which he had begun to experiment with. He waited for the perfect moment to unleash it. A dark aura erupted from within him, raw and uncontrolled. He winced, recalling how difficult it was to use or acquire ordinary skills in the daylight, the sun god's curse still clinging to him like a weight. It was overwhelming and dreadful. He wondered if leveling up would eventually rid him of it. For now, though, he had no choice but to endure. His priority was to build his skills, starting with shadow movement. With swift, silent steps, he raced through the forest toward a monster called Keto, vanishing into the darkness. No longer just a trainee, he was now a shadow, moving with deadly intent. As Inori practiced, he encountered the bird monster again. This time, he had a plan. Using shadow movement, he got close, prepared to strike. His skills had improved, and he mixed them with dark magic to create shadow ropes made of pure energy. The ropes coiled around the bird, securing it like a hunter trapping its prey. With a flick of his fingers, Inori tightened the ropes, transforming them into black death silk. The bird screamed in pain, but Inori advanced, his eyes fixed on its dwindling strength. Using hypnosis, he pushed his will into the creature's mind, and just like that, the monster fell under his control without resistance. While dark magic couldn't control the living, the dead were his to command. He finished the job with a swift movement, lifting the bird's lifeless body high into the air. His shadow stirred beneath him like a beast's mouth, swallowing the corpse into the darkness, hidden from sight. But that wasn't enough. Inori wanted more. He tracked another monster, ugly and unworthy of eating, but perfect for his purposes. By morning, he had defeated enough creatures to fuel his growth. Returning to his room, he collapsed onto his bed, just in time for his usual routine. Nala, ever persistent, dragged him back into reality. Over the past 2 weeks, Inori had used hypnosis to uncover dark secrets about the Sun Kingdom, and what he had found was nothing short of madness. The royal bloodline had always been passed down through daughters, but a strange illness had wiped out the heirs, leaving the throne empty. In desperation, the royal family had taken drastic measures, bringing in a duchess as the king's concubine. She gave birth to a daughter, Alalia, who was named heir. But fate had other plans. 7 years later, the queen gave birth to another girl, Amanda, who possessed the queen's magic. Alalia, once the future queen, was cast aside, ignored, and replaced by Amanda. The girl who was meant to rule became nothing more than a shadow, a princess abandoned by the very family that was supposed to love her. Inori, half asleep during yet another boring lesson, caught himself staring at Aaliyah, feeling an unexpected sense of deep pity. She walked over to his desk and tapped it, snapping him to attention. If Inori wasn't willing to learn properly, these lessons were pointless. He barely stifled a yawn, rolling his eyes at her scolding, but then her tone shifted. It was different from the usual polite, empty words. Aaliyah called him out. If he was truly learning detection, concealment, and martial arts, he needed to take it seriously. Magic wasn't his main strength, but he had something else, something special that others didn't. If he focused, if he worked hard, he could surpass all expectations. Inori scoffed, thinking how pathetic he must look in a world where even the weakest maid could cast simple spells. What was he to do? Struggle while others effortlessly surpassed him? Then Aaliyah did something unexpected. She got truly mad. Not her usual quiet frustration or fake smile, but real, burning anger. She snapped at him, saying that if even the Knight Commander was willing to train him, he had no excuse for slacking off. If he wanted to stop being weak, he needed to start acting like it. Without waiting for a response, she turned on her heel and ordered him to follow her. He barely had time to process what was happening before she led him through a hidden passage deep in the castle. They stopped in front of a massive white door, and with a flick of her fingers, it creaked open. "No more lessons," she said. "From now on, this is our training ground." She stepped inside and turned to face him with an expression he had never seen, cold, determined, and dead serious. She asked how it felt to be the weakest among heroes, how it felt to be looked down on, to be nothing. In awe, Inori stood there, dumbfounded. This was not the same princess who smiled through everything, who played the forgotten role with grace. This was someone else, someone furious, someone determined to carve out her own place in the world, no matter the cost. And now, she was dragging him into that fight. Aaliyah, once pushed aside for the throne and turned into a living doll, had been abandoned after her past failures. People began calling her a doll, but standing in front of Inori, her anger was undeniable. She walked into the room, where a purple magic circle glowed on the ceiling. As Inori followed her in, she warned him that if he didn't start working harder, he would soon be kicked from the castle. The kingdom had no obligation to keep someone who wasn't trying. Inori thought this idea was ridiculous, but he tried, reasoning that his detection blessing was useful in certain situations. Aaliyah agreed that it had its uses, but made it clear that it didn't matter if he wasn't improving. She asked why, with such a gift, he wasn't trying harder. Inori thought of the times he'd nodded off in her lessons, but it wasn't because he was lazy, it was because he'd been hunting all night. He shrugged it off, saying he was already doing his best, but deep down, he accepted that he'd always be inferior to the three heroes and the first princess. He tried to walk away, but Aaliyah stopped him, revealing that the room was locked with a magical barrier and no one would come to help him. Inori, pretending indifference, asked how he could get out. Aaliyah snapped, done with his apathy. She kicked him toward the main door and told him that if he got kicked out with his current skills, he would die in the forest. Embarrassing as it was, he needed to survive in the castle first. At that moment, Inori realized that Aaliyah was no longer the doll princess. She stood there, proud and noble, angry but firm. She told him that he could get stronger if he stopped being so blind to the world around him. Her intensity took him by surprise. For a brief moment, he couldn't help but laugh aloud. He admitted that he had underestimated her, never expecting her to be so strong. He told her to relax, that his drive to get stronger was far greater than the others, and that he was just like her. Aaliyah froze, shocked by his words. Her eyes widened as she saw him in a new light. Dark magic swirled around him, his eyes glowing. Aaliyah recognized his power, but it still felt like he was on the verge of being thrown out. Inori promised that he would find a way to stay in the castle. From that moment on, Inori took everything more seriously. He worked hard, gathering valuable information about the kingdom and showing that his detection blessing was more useful than people realized. After training with Hygen, Inori planned to ask her to speak with the queen on his behalf, hoping to stay in the castle. When he made the request, Hygen told him it might be difficult to gain the queen's approval, but she wasn't underestimating him. She saw his skills as invaluable. She suggested that if he joined the knights, he could be a huge asset in dungeons or when fighting the powerful Demon King. She motivated him, saying that if he kept working hard, he might avoid being kicked from the kingdom. After receiving an offer to join the knights, Inori began weighing his options, unsure of what trouble accepting might bring. He asked for some time to think it over. Hygen, taken aback by his response, remained quiet for a moment before telling him that he could come back to her when he had nowhere else to go. Days later, Inori learned that heroes from a neighboring country would be visiting. Aliyah would be attending the meeting, but Inori was excluded from the event. He couldn't help but complain. While Aliyah sipped her tea, she bluntly told him it was his own fault for sleeping through lessons. That's why he wasn't invited. Inori grumbled, suspecting he was being deliberately left out of the entire event. While the neighboring heroes were celebrated with grand festivities, Inori found himself alone in his room, muttering to himself. Despite the kingdom's financial struggles, they were spending a fortune on this event. He wondered if anyone would notice him if he showed up at the party. His mind raced with scenarios, explaining to foreign dignitaries how he got dragged into the summoning, how he was an ordinary hero different from the others. An investigation team might arrive with foreign guests and decide to study him, leading to endless trouble. He let out a heavy sigh, collapsing back on the bed. But then, he quickly sat up again. Watching people enjoy the party from the sidelines didn't appeal, but he realized it was his only option if he wanted to gather more information on the heroes. Inori activated his poet's mystic eye, its red glow lighting up as it extended beyond the usual limits of sight. His vision zoomed in on the hall, where he saw both princesses hosting the event. He wasn't impressed by the extravagant display and rolled his eyes at the sight of Aliyah, who was dressed like a doll again, her smile as fake as always. His gaze wandered to the food tables, getting lost in the sheer number of delicacies laid out there. He remembered hearing from Nala that the queen loved to show off her wealth to foreign countries, and this lavish banquet was a perfect example of that obsession. The country's financial crisis was not just because of bad internal management. It was a direct result of the queen's obsession with flaunting their wealth, disregarding the king's own warnings. His eyes scanned the room, and as they passed over the other guests, they landed on the heroes. He noticed 3 heroes standing off to the side, chatting among themselves. One was a cheerful girl with pigtails, reminding him of Tamaki. Another, a gloomy boy, seemed like one Inori could easily befriend. Indeed, he smirked to himself, confident the gloomy kid would be his ally. But then, his eyes fell on the last hero. A blonde guy caught his attention for a different reason. Inori immediately thought this guy was Japanese like him. Using his poet's mystic eye, he focused on him, wanting to check his stats. The hero's name was Date Masayoshi, an old-fashioned name that seemed to fit perfectly for a hero. Inori observed him closely, noticing that he was shouting loudly at Ryudo. Curious, Inori zoomed in further with his mystic eye and then read the hero's lips. To his surprise, Date was demanding that Ryudo bring Inori right in front of him. Date Masayoshi was challenging Inori. After the party, Aliyah took Date to meet Inori. She led him into a room and introduced them to the other heroes. Ryudo's group and the visiting heroes were curious to see if Inori had any real connection to Date. Inori, standing there with a bored look, didn't seem fazed by Date's aggressive challenge to a new duel. Everyone in the room, including Aliyah, the princess, and Ryudo's group, was stunned by Date's sudden, odd declaration. The rest of Date's group only looked at him with pity, clearly used to his dramatic outbursts. After a moment of thinking, Inori asked Date why he wanted to fight him. It was confusing. Inori genuinely wanted to know how Date knew of him and why he was so eager for a duel. Date, with too much energy, explained he wanted to prove to the goddess that Inori wasn't worthy at all. Inori frowned, trying to figure out which goddess he was talking about. This made Date angrier. He yelled at Inori, demanding he stop pretending to be clueless. Date then mentioned the white space where souls temporarily stay before being guided to the next world by the goddess, who also gives them a gift. He asked if Inori had been there and met the goddess. Inori remembered her and asked what meeting the goddess had to do with their duel. Date, looking away shyly, admitted he had proposed to the goddess while in the white space. It turned out this guy, who looked like a troublemaker, was hopelessly in love with the goddess. Inori was still confused when Date shouted again. Date explained that after his proposal, the goddess set a condition. If he could defeat Inori, she would consider his proposal. Inori finally got it. realizing the goddess had tossed this troublesome challenge his way. Now, he made a mental note to deal with the goddess the next time he saw her around. Ryudo, confused, asked Tamaki if she knew about the white space. She had no clue, just like Date's teammates, who were just as confused about which goddess he meant. Inori, looking at the oblivious faces around him, decided explaining the situation would be a huge hassle, so he played dumb for the time being. He agreed to the duel after a quick moment of thought. Date smirked, lowering Inori to the ground, excited to defeat him and win the goddess's favor. Once on the ground, Inori told Date there would be conditions for the duel. He'd be setting the rules. He explained his blessing didn't grant combat skills. Unlike other heroes, he had no physical powers or abilities, so it would be unfair to fight one-on-one. Ryudo and his group seemed pleased hearing Inori speak so openly about his own limitations. Date said he could let him play dirty if that's the kind of hero Date really was. This triggered Date, who snapped back, ready to accept any challenge Inori proposed. By all, the other heroes, including the princess, were shocked by how simple-minded Date was. Inori proposed the dungeon near the capital as the venue for their duel. It was a place where knights trained. Inori suggested they race to defeat the first-level boss of the dungeon to determine the winner. Date, without a second thought, accepted the challenge. Rita, worried about injuries and physical abilities, tried to stop him, thinking Inori was just a weak hero. But Inori assured him that he had a plan. The duel was set for the next day. The duel's day had arrived. Then, after the match, Inori was presented in front of the queen herself, who immediately insulted him for his poor performance in the dungeon. She pointed out it was Inori who chose the venue, yet he was defeated and disgraced. Date had indeed proven to be incredibly strong, easily clearing first-level monsters with his impressive swordsmanship on par with the Knight Commander's skills. He beat the final boss effortlessly. On the other hand, Inori had used his skills to sneak around the dungeon, avoiding all the monsters, including the boss, who he could have easily defeated. Inori quietly acknowledged this duel was his loss. The queen, frustrated, complained she had tolerated his increased and lazy behavior only because the trusted Knight Commander asked her to. But with his disgraceful performance, Inori had brought shame to the country. The queen's words were clearly biased, driven by her favoritism and disdain for Inori. She'd been looking for an excuse to banish him, and this duel gave her the perfect reason. With a raised fan and a shout, the queen declared she would exile Inori from the kingdom. But Inori, from his spot on the floor, smiled up at her. Unknown to the queen, Inori had set up the duel to work in his favor all along. The queen stood in front of Inori and told him he had caused harm to the country, so she was banishing him. The first princess stared at him, while the second princess closed her eyes, accepting the consequences Inori had brought on himself. Inori smirked. Then, the queen asked if he had any objections. He looked straight at her and said he did. This surprised the queen, as no one ever spoke back to her. He asked her what harm he had actually caused. The queen tried to blame him for losing the duel against Date, but Inori pointed out that even though he lost, it had nothing to do with the country. It was just two men fighting over who was worthy of being with the goddess. Inori also reminded her that the duel was supposed to be kept secret, so her claim he hurt the country's reputation didn't make sense. He wasn't even considered a hero by anyone, and no other nations even knew who he was, so he couldn't have hurt the kingdom. The duel was just a personal challenge between him and Date, with no real stakes for the country. After making his point, Inori told the queen he hadn't been doing nothing in the dungeon. He gestured to the guards, who brought in snacks and set them down beside him. The queen was confused as Inori opened the bags and revealed they were all filled with gold coins. Everyone at the hearing was shocked. Inori told the queen this was a gift he found on the first floor. He brought it to her since he knew he couldn't defeat the hero. He added he used his special ability to find the treasure. The queen, drawn to the gold, was distracted. Inori made sure to use her love for wealth to solidify his position in the castle. Inori was clever. He used the duel to prove he had value and could bring more treasure in the future. The second princess watched, amazed at how Inori turned the situation around, convincing the queen while keeping the hero in good spirits. Later that night, Inori was able to practice again without worrying about being banished. With that problem solved, he focused on his hunting skills. After wiping blood from his face, He decided he was getting bored of just hunting easy catches. Something felt off in the air. He looked around and noticed the forest nearby didn't feel right. With his detection ability, he realized something was wrong. He decided to use his special vision. He activated his mystic eye, revealing an illusionary barrier in front of him. His eye glowed red as he saw through the strange illusion. He touched the barrier. It sent ripples through the strange pink layer, making him wonder if his skill from another world was helping him find this hidden barrier. Curious, Inori reached inside, hoping to find stronger creatures than the crows beyond the barrier. He decided to step in quickly to check it out before the sun came up, since his powers wouldn't work once it did. As soon as Inori stepped inside, the air changed. Deep inside the barrier, a dangerous wolf-like beast waited for him. Its glowing blue eyes and very sharp fangs were ready to attack. Little did Inori know, a group of powerful beasts was waiting for him to face them all. Beyond the barrier, a predator waits, ancient, powerful, and hungry. Inori has crossed into its domain. Will he survive the wrath of the beast? The hunt has only just begun. Subscribe, like the video, and join Inori on his next deadly encounter.